Public Utilities Commission. Roll call, all members are present, Bill, Charles, myself, and Mike and Patrick. First item on the agenda would be the approved consent agenda. And 3 items there, approved meeting minutes and the payments report. Anybody have anything they want to pull from last meeting? Which we're going to discuss some stuff in the last meeting already, so. But anyway, on the first 3 items, approved consent agenda, any discussion?
Looks good to me.
Okay. So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Bill? Okay, consent agenda passes. Next item is the 2023 wastewater and water budget and rates.
Here we go again. Let's start with water, shall we?
Okay.
Everything starts with water.
Everything
Yeah.
starts with water.
We're just going to follow it right through the pipes. For 2023, I'm going to end up recommending an increase in our rates, so 3%. And let's talk about why. The current budget shows an increase in personnel expenses, an increase in operating supplies, an increase in contracted services, and a decrease in debt service and our capital reserve amounts. But the total budget is very close to what our budget was in 2022. You can see it went from $482,000 to $483,000, about $1,200 difference. So, why do we need an increase? If you look at our projected revenues, the 2023 budget, I'm projecting $410,000 to be collected through utility bills. So all the different fees that we charge folks.
That would be if rates stay the same.
If rates stay the same.
Yeah.
And we had projected $420,000 in the 2022 budget, but I don't think we're going to get to it. The water sales are down in 2022 compared to previous years.
Why would that be?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
If you look at the very long-term trend, the last 40 years, they've just been going down. And I think it's because we focus on efficiency. And, fixtures are using a lot less water than they used to. And I think over time, that's definitely been the major driver for why water sales go down. But why are they down in 22 from 21?
Right.
I don't know.
Had a wet summer. That might explain it.
It could.
Less sprinkling.
In 20, it was pretty easy to tell the story why they were down because of COVID. In 21, things came back. A lot of our economic indicators showed 21 was as strong a year as we've had, but water sales wasn't one of those.
It's primarily residential, right? This isn't, the bulk of the revenue there comes from residential sales, not commercial or industrial or anything like that.
The more from residential than commercial, but there's both significant.
Yeah.
And the commercial ends up being, I'm just saying, commercial electricity I can get, but commercial water, where would that be? Where is that
Hotels.
going?
Hotels,
Oh, yeah, of course.
Restaurants.
condos, hotels, restaurants,
Yeah.
gas stations that flush their toilets.
If you
a
think
lot.
about our big customers for electric, they're also our big customers for water.
Yeah.
The courthouse, the hospital, the school, the Y, hotels.
Where people are.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not a significant drop, but it's a measurable one. And so to look at 23, when we do these budgets, I typically imagine that next year is going to be the same as what's happening this year, unless there are some factors that we know about at play. I don't actually expect it to be the same because there will be factors, right? But we don't know about them. We can't predict them. And so that's the tool we're using, is to try and imagine, is there going to be new customers that are coming online next year? Is there some type of activity that's going to happen that didn't in the past? And for this time, I don't really believe that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't added a lot of units of residential or commercial, so I think a flat sales prediction is the way to go, but it'll be either up or down from there. The rest of the components of the revenue are much smaller than utility bills. The biggest chunk is there's a special assessment and debt levy. We actually make a payment on one of the bonds that paid for a water reconstruction project without using water rates. We're using a levy on the entire city and special assessments on the benefited properties. So we have sometimes talked about whether or not it would be appropriate to make a change and start paying that debt with water revenues instead. That's how we've typically designed debt in the past 15 years anyway, is that we're going to use water revenues to pay for water reconstruction projects. We can talk more about that when we look at the second page, but for now, just know that $50,000 is kind of on both sides of the balance sheet.
So
Item.
just for clarification, if it's a levy, it's fixed. Everybody's going to pay that some certain amount. They're going to pay that some certain amount, but it's not. It doesn't change according to their water use or
That's
sewer
right.
use. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's a levy. When we certify our property tax levy to the county, we give them a total number. And that total number is made up of, I think, 4 now, debt levies, and then just a general levy. And they go through the calculus of determining rates and property values and who gets to pay what. So we just send them a number and say we need $36,000 for this debt levy, and they figure out who's paying what of it.
Oh, so that comes out of that's a tax revenue. It doesn't appear on people's utility bill.
Nope, it's not on their utility bill.
I
It's
see.
a property tax levy.
I see.
And special assessment on some properties. Then there's a small amount of miscellaneous, and then you see the rate increase is 3% of 410,000. So add all that up, and it's about the same as last year. So that 3% increase is basically covering what's happening this year's shortfall in water sales.
You said that in 2022 you had projected $420,000 worth of revenue, but you don't think we're going to get there.
I think we're going to get to about 410.
Okay, so but does that mean we're $10,000 shortfall for 2022?
It would if all of our expenses were also right where we thought they would be. But I don't believe that's the case. So
So you think we'll end up pretty okay for 2022?
I think we're underspending on some of our budgeted expense items, and we'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll probably even be a little bit ahead in 2022. So the 3% increase is partially a conservative idea, just to make sure, because this is a budget that's intended to recover as much in revenue as it spends every year. And when it's close, we don't want to fall behind. It's also conservative because we know there are larger projects coming up where we're going to need more money from water to pay debt payments. Namely, we're going to do a project next year on Fifth Avenue, and I don't know whether we're going to need any debt to pay for water, but we may decide we want to. And I haven't seen a number yet, so I can't say. And then the next big project that we have yet to really start planning for, but we know is the one we're budgeting for, is First Street reconstruction from, well, basically the library as far west as we want to go and as far up and down as we want to go. But First Street is the next big infrastructure project that we're making room for a payment in upcoming budgets.
2024 probably for that.
Maybe. That's as early as it would happen.
I see. And is part of the reconstruction, I don't mean to get off track here, but is part of the reconstruction, is that replacing lead services up to the houses? Are those still around? I'm guessing yes, right?
Well, we don't have any knowledge about any lead services up to the houses. I don't know that we have any. I don't believe we have any.
You mean we in the city?
Yeah, like up to the curb stop from the main. I don't believe we have any lead services. What we'll talk about replacing is everything that's in the right of way.
Yep.
So all the infrastructure, water, sewer, even electric if it's in the way, storm sewer that's in the right of way, and then all the streets, pavements, curbs that are on top.
I
So
see.
comprehensively. We won't go on to people's property though, so
Right.
if there's where they want to do work on their own service lines from the property line to their house,
Right,
We'll
that's
be
on
on
them,
Yeah.
right, but it just seems like that would be the time to do it too, right?
We're doing sidewalk? Are we doing sidewalk?
we will on
'Cause
some of
there's
First Street.
There's some sidewalk already on that street.
Fifth
Yeah,
or
and
first?
It'll just be a question of,
No, first,
what does the pedestrian plan call for?
first, yeah.
So there we go. Any questions about why some of these numbers might have changed, or what components make them up, or can we just move on to the next?
I'll just note, and I checked this for all three of the water, sewer, and electricity. I looked at my own bill and said, okay, what does a 3% increase end up looking like?
Right.
For, I don't know, I guess we're sort of typical, maybe. But it's, for sewer, it'd be 85 cents a month.
Yeah.
Change it. Assuming it's just, that's just in the use side, 3% increase in the use side, so.
It'll be across the board 3%.
Right, but I'm just saying, for the commercial customers, it might hit a lot harder, but for a residential customer, 85 cents a month is,
I think you could look at a typical residential bill and say it's $150 to $175 a month with
Yeah.
water, sewer, and electric all in. So if they all went up 3%, you're talking about $5, $6 a month.
okay, but isn't the rate increase, doesn't that only affect the use portion?
No, I'm recommending the entire rate.
Oh.
3%.
So the fixed fees are also going to increase 3%?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Yeah. The expense budget's made up of all of our fixed and variable costs. And in order to collect enough money to make up for the total expense budget, we need to move the whole revenue side up 3%. So if we were going to move just the variable rate to cover that $12,000 of rate increase, it would be a much more significant percentage. And there's no reason for us to go one way or the other, put it all in the variable or to spread it across. There's really no reason other than it's easy to understand everything moving up 3%.
Okay.
We haven't done a rate study on water or wastewater for a long time that would help us decide what should be fixed and what should be variable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to vote on these as a package or one at a time?
Well, one at a time, but let's talk about some of the stuff on the next page first.
Yep.
So just a quick history. We did a regular 2% increase 2014 to 18. And then we haven't changed rates since 2018 in the water department. So it's been flat for a number of years now. A 3% increase during a year when we've had 7 or 8% inflation. Like the same story with electric. Like this is, it could have been a lot worse. This feels pretty good to me that we're only looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
So the piece that's about capital is a big chunk of this budget. We collect, and I'm saying collect, but it's on the expense side of the sheet. We've got depreciation of $165,000. Well, we're not actually writing a check to somebody for $165,000. We're accumulating it ourselves. It needs to be accounted for on our expense side as a way for us to account for the declining value in our infrastructure so that we can afford to replace it when it needs to be. We also have a small number of debt service, which is only the interest component of our debt. As the interest component gets smaller, the fixed component gets bigger. All of our debt is structured that way, just like your home mortgage would be, where it's a fixed payment, and over time the principal goes up and the interest goes down. And as you can see, a lot of our debt is pretty old because that's a small number compared to how much our total payments are. And then we add this $10,000 in there as we need a little bit more than the depreciation and the debt service covers, just to start making room for those future payments that we know are going to be different than the ones today. So of that $188,000 that we're collecting on the expense side of things, here are the payments we're using it for. We're paying off a 2004 loan, and that's the one that is currently has a levy and special assessment component. That's a 20-year bond, and so next year will be the last time we collect for it. And that's why when we talked about First Street being around 2024, that we did schedule it that way, because this payment's coming off the books. We're going to use that room in the budget to pay for the next big project, or at least part of the next big project. It won't be nearly enough. There's also this MMUA loan of 2007, a 2008 improvement, and then the 2017 improvements, which is the Public Works facility. Those are the payments that we're on the hook for. The 7 and the 8 are also scheduled to come off the books after 20 years, so towards the end of this decade, those will also be gone from the budget, but again, they'll likely have been replaced and then some with the First Street project. So that's a total of $170,000 in next year's budget that we're going to be spending on debt payments. We've collected $188 to do it, so there's a remaining $17,000, which our intention is to just accumulate in our fund balance and use to pay down, pay some cash towards some of the projects if we have the fund balance to do it, to pay for unanticipated improvements that come up, and also just to make a little room for a larger payment in the future so that we don't have to increase the rates 15, 20% when that new payment shows up.
So, just good, appreciate the explanations. So if we're saying depreciation is 165,000 annually, or at least in this year, in this
Yes.
budget cycle, it seems like there's kind of a problem then, because, but and I'm probably just not understanding it well, but it seems there's kind of a problem because there's no, that money seems like it's not being banked anywhere to, as you say, make up for all this equipment and
Yeah.
capital kind of.
We would need to
arrangement that are-
bank it if we were paying cash for everything. But we're not. We're borrowing money up front to pay for almost all of our infrastructure projects. So we're paying it back instead of paying it forward with that depreciation. We're using that depreciation to pay the debt payment on what's already in the ground.
see.
And so it actually does work exactly the way it's intended. As those things age, we're paying for their age with this depreciation. If we wanted to change that and get ahead and accumulate cash and pay cash for projects, then we'd have to raise the rates quite a bit to get rid of the debt. And some places like to do it that way. They don't want to have any debt.
Yep.
That's pretty hard to do. And the philosophy is also a bit tricky, like who should pay for the improvements that we're making. If we're paying cash for a pipe that's going to be in the ground for 80 years, then we ask the people that were here for the past 30 years to pay for that pipe, and the people that are here for the next 80 years are going to benefit from it. And so this way, when we borrow money and then use current rates to pay those debt payments, it's the folks that are actually benefiting from that improvement that
Now.
are paying for it.
Yeah, yep. And the assets are primarily in the ground assets. It's water mains and services and valves and.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. And there's also buildings and machinery, particularly the wastewater plant, but also the water plant
Right.
is a pretty expensive asset.
Yeah.
And then we also have some vehicles and other things that we do depreciate.
Okay, thanks.
So what say you about the water? Budget acceptable? Rate increase makes sense?
I think it makes sense, in particular in a year, I mean, it was with all these, in a year where inflation is 7-8%, I don't know what we're going to end up with over the course of the year, but it seems like it shouldn't be surprising to anybody that the rates are going up, and in fact, it should be in some way kind of a relief that they're only going up that much. I hope.
An economist might argue that, they do argue that inflationary anticipation is part of what drives inflation. People think, oh my God, there's inflation, I better raise my prices to make up for what I'm going to lose in the next year.
Well, it's
Then
not, right,
contributes to inflation.
it's not what we're doing here,
But-
of course.
Well, maybe a little, but, you got to do it because it's real. So, no, I think it's very reasonable. I would move we accept the staff recommendation of a 3% increase. Anything else needed in that motion?
You're just talking the water, right?
Just the water.
Just the water.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the water rate increase of 3% and a second by Charles. Do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. There'll be a 3% increase for water.
Sewer.
A little bit broken record here. I'm going to recommend
Yep, I
a
see
3% increase in
Sewer?
sewer rates for 2023.
Let's look at the budget here.
All good things come in threes, right? Sewer is in a very different place than water is. And I think that's reflected in the history of rate increases that have happened in the sewer side. Whereas for water, we haven't changed rates since 2018. For sewer, there hasn't been a year where we didn't change rates in the past 6 years. And it's been 3 or 5 for most of those years. It was only 2 one year. And for sure, on the sewer side of things, we are building up for some significant capital improvements in the treatment plant itself that we don't have enough knowledge or information about what they're going to look like yet to be sure what those numbers are going to be, and we also don't know who else is going to help us pay for them. That's certainly part of the strategy. But we do know that there's going to be some significant projects coming up, and we have to make sure that the sewer fund is healthy enough to address them. For the operating budget for next year, you can see similar story. Personnel side is going up. Now, just to note, the water and sewer personnel budgets are the same number. Like, we have the same people in the total amount is really what's important. And sometimes it shifts between water and sewer on an actual use basis. We track people's time as they're working, whether they're working on water and sewer, and charge it to that. So when we budget it, we're assuming a split of hours based on historical data. But if you look at the actual spending on both of those, it goes up and down a little bit, and it shifts back and forth a little bit. And for 21, I think it shifted a little towards sewer, and the fact that it's kind of was flat between 19 and 20 showed that it probably shifted a little bit towards water one side. But we have enough money in both the water and the sewer budgets to pay for the staff that we're anticipating that is just shared staff between water and sewer. Supplies is also going up a little bit. Services is going up a little bit, and we're going to talk about what that is in wastewater in a second. Miscellaneous is a little bit higher. Depreciation's about the same, and then the debt service, as you can see, has come down again. Same story. Those payments are getting to the end of their 20 years, and it's the same schedule that water has. But that ends up with a budget that's actually quite a bit higher than last year. So the water budget's relatively flat. The sewer budget's actually quite a bit more than it was last year. The services, there's really 2 chunks of that are the biggest piece of it. One is our plant is designed to process the waste to a certain level. It's putting clean water back into the lake, but it's producing sludge, biosolids, whatever you want to call it, that's not done being treated. And in the past, some time ago, we were spreading that on land and allowing that to biodegrade naturally on land. That's really not, we don't have land where that's a good place or it's conducive to do that in Cook County for the most part. And so we had to stop doing that. And instead now we haul it to Duluth, where they run it through their treatment plant until it's a finished product that's done. And hauling it to Duluth is an expensive thing to do. We have to pay someone to truck it, which is expensive, and then we also have to pay Duluth by volume to take it, which is expensive. And so that hauling costs us, $140,000 of that $260,000, which is why we've done a lot of work on how do we manage the volume of that. That work can sometimes create other operational issues at the wastewater plant. And some of those have, on occasion, created some of the odors that we've dealt with in the past 5 years. But there's a lot of money at stake to try and to dial that in correctly. There's a little bit of give and take, and one of the ideas is if we just concentrate it more, then there's less volume, and we can haul it down there less times, and it costs less trucking, but then it actually costs more per volume when we bring it there because it's stronger. So but here we go at $140,000 a year. It's suddenly, we might be open to some significant capital improvements to the plant itself that might change the way that that works. And so that'll be part of our conversations in the next couple of years as we're talking about the next evolution of this treatment plant. There's some incentive for us to not have to haul things to Duluth.
Where does that planning stand?
Our engineers are going to come to your December meeting and talk a little bit about their preliminary thoughts on mostly odor issues, but also plant issues in general. And I think consider that kind of a kickoff of that conversation.
You're anticipating a pretty serious rebuild?
Well, for sure, yeah. I mean, not like next year, but the plant is not young. Its last improvements were done 30 years ago, significant improvements. Obviously, we've made lots and lots and lots of changes and improvements in those 30 years as well. We've replaced a lot of equipment, but there's a lot of equipment we haven't had to touch because it's been fine. And it has a life expectancy.
So you have an analysis on that and how these growing expenses because of the age of it are counterbalancing the decision to when to,
I don't know that there's a
Pull
lot
the
of
trigger?
growing expenses due to the age of it.
other than the sludge?
The sludge is really not about the age of the plant. It's more about, what's being done in the city.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason that cost is going up is because fuel costs go up, because labor costs go up. It's really not about the plant as much as it's about the rest of the economy.
It's still an expense on the plant, though. so-
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's the big one. Well, after our employees, they're always the most important and typically the largest chunk of our budget. The next piece of that is electricity, actually. The sewer plant is one of our larger electric customers in town. Not the largest, but it's a significant amount of money. And so again, we've got some incentive and some financial ability to potentially pay for improvements that save on electricity over there as well.
That falls under services?
That falls in
Any of those?
services,
Yeah.
yeah. Any more questions about that, or we skip ahead to revenues?
Do you seek out the community block grant program money for these kinds of things? Is that something you've done in the past? I just saw it in the news yesterday, this round of grants.
Yeah, do you like that, the small cities money?
Yeah.
And the headline was that it was spent on housing rehabilitation, but if you drill down into the story, most of it's spent on infrastructure,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do look for grants and have been successful in getting grants for a lot of projects, but not always. And a lot of those projects or programs are providing loans where we actually get better terms on the market. But it's definitely something, most major engineering companies, probably all of them, that's part of their business
They
model,
provide that service.
is to go and search out those funds for you and to be experts in it and to try and position us for that. And then IRRB here is our other program that we've been a regular partner with to help with infrastructure projects. Like water, and really like electric, most of our revenue comes from utility bills. That's by design. And we're going to be closer on sewer, I'm not sure why, probably because there was a rate increase last year, whereas with water there wasn't. We thought we'd get about $600,000 plus $18,000 in a rate increase in 2022. And rather than put 618 in this year's budget, I'm putting 6 again, because I think that's probably where we're going to end up, is about at 6. Fees, those fees are fees that we charge for new construction. That's been a point of conversation from time to time is whether those fees are something that is a barrier that could be removed that would make housing easier to build. That's a question for you all, and it's one of the areas where we've got priorities that conflict with each other. You know, we want to invest in housing. Is this the right place to do it? Should we be asking other ratepayers to use their utility bill money to underwrite the cost of new construction, to subsidize someone's new construction? That's what we would be doing if we got rid of those fees. And that's, I don't mean to lean that one way or the other. That's the policy question. And if it becomes one that's on your agenda, it'll be up to you to decide what's the right way to go.
It doesn't seem like a big expense. I mean, certainly not by comparison to the other things on this list, but I don't know. Somebody's going to build a single-family house. What does the fee end up being?
About $3,000 for water, sewer, and electric.
So this is you're looking at 2 homes here, maybe 3?
Well,
With
this is just the
7,500.
sewer piece of it.
Water, sewer,
So-
electric here.
This is just a
And-
sewer,
Right.
yeah.
If it's a new unit, yeah, and I think, 4 or 5 new units a year is probably what's built into that budget. Sometimes they pay that $3,000 if it's brand new. Sometimes there's already a service connection and they're just paying for a new metering connection and it's less. So the 7,500 is not made up of a bunch of 3,000s. Yeah, it's not a huge amount of this budget, and yet on the flip side, it's not a huge amount of the budget for building a house either.
Right.
So there are towns where it's $30,000 or $40,000 for those connection charges, rather than
So the
3.
intent is to actually cover the work that the city does.
Right.
It's incurred by the city for that.
Our fees are designed to do that. They don't actually cover that anymore. But there's also a piece of it that we call a facility fee, and that's 2,000 of the 3,000. And the intent there is to ask new people to pay a portion of the costs for the infrastructure that was already built, that they're benefiting from. There's a lot of pipe between the treatment plant and the new stick of pipe that they're connecting to, that they didn't have to contribute to. And so that's what that access charge is really trying to do. It's also a way to insulate us from, if there was rapid growth, we'd have some resources to improve the things that would need to be improved or expanded to make up for that rapid growth. That at $1,000 a unit, it's really not doing either of those at a whole high level, but it's at least keeping that issue on the table. The real question, I think, that might come to you when it comes to development costs is, are you willing to invest in new water and sewer lines on a speculative nature to get new customers that you can charge rates to pay for them? That's where the pricey part of building housing comes in, is putting a new sewer line and a new water line in the street in front of it. That's hundreds of thousands, whereas, $1,000 for a facility fee is peanuts compared to what the new lines cost. The Planning Commission's talking about that issue. Where should the city be at on this? And typically, I've encouraged folks to not think of the Utilities Commission as the source of that money to pay for those things. Like, the city can pay for those things if the city wants that to be their priority, but they should pay you if you're investing in it. You shouldn't have to take, again, other people's utility bills to pay for new water and sewer lines. If the community wants to invest in that, they can, but not necessarily through the rates, is my point. You can see, when it comes to sludge hauling, we actually have a bit of a symbiotic relationship with our partners that are doing the trucking for us, because they also have a facility in the business park where they're hauling septage and gray water from around the entire county and processing it, and then we charge them a special rate. They are our one significant industrial user that we have a special rate for, because what they're bringing is not typical wastewater, and it does require a little more paying attention to when it comes to volumes and rates that it's getting into our system. And since it creates more work for our system, we charge them for that. And you can see that number in there has gone up and down. 19 and 20 It was about in the low to mid 80s. In 21, it was down to just under 70,000. We actually made a rate increase as well then at the end of 21, and that was the first rate increase that we've done since the plant was built, their plant. And so 22 budget was at 73, but we're actually going to collect more than $100,000, closer to 120 in the 22 budget.
Wait, so we collect that from whom?
We collect that from G&G Septic. So they haul to their processing facility in the business park, and then they pay us a utility fee to dump that sewer into our system. And, they're just passing it on to their septic customers, and it's a better business, value proposition for them to pay for this facility and to pay us to deal with it than it is for them to truck all of that down to Duluth.
What do they actually do for processing at their site?
There's not much they need to do.
Dump it in the pipe.
They've got a lovely piece of equipment called the Muffin Monster. It's just a grinder, I believe. They got a tank then as well up there where they can hold it and
They release it?
release it at,
Times,
in volume that we want. So it just allows us to have that conversation with them about what goes in and how quick and when.
Is that changing at all with the, I know they hauled a lot of water from Taconite Harbor, from the plant. Is that going away now, or?
Are we still getting it?
You're still getting it.
Yeah, I think we haven't changed that.
They're still using that even though, but it may stop, huh?
There's still water coming out of the coal
Yeah,
fly ash pile.
looks like the coal's going away though.
Looked like they trucked it away,
Coal's
yeah.
going away, but the fly ash pile is still sitting up the hill.
Oh, is that what it's from? I thought it's from the coal pile itself.
A small amount,
Oh,
maybe.
okay. Yeah, there's a pond down there, I think they pump, but.
So the
Yeah.
gray water is, that's gray water.
Yeah.
And we charge actually less for that. And that is at a strength where it's useful to our system to have that included in the mix, rather than all septage from tanks, which is a lot more difficult to handle.
Yes. Okay, it's interesting.
And so that's a big chunk of our revenue, that, other than utility rates is and I guess technically it is one, I just kind of call it out separately because it is a different type of rate. And it's not, everyone else is connected to the system that they're paying the bill. This one is, that it has to make a business case for them in order for them to continue to use us. And I think it's just another way to point out how important the sewer plant is to the community, and not just Grand Marais, but also really the entire county, the service that it provides. And the reason why we only have one city in Cook County, I mean, this is what a city is a place where there's infrastructure that can handle density. And without that sewer plant, there's really no other place where they're ever going to have the kind of density that Grand Marais has.
Yeah, it's the only sewer plant in Cook County, isn't it? Or-
Well, it's the only significant one.
Yeah,
There's a lot of real
one
small
size,
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the capital side of things here, a little bit simpler because there's fewer payments that are in and out. So we've got the 149,000 of depreciation and the 19 of debt service. We don't have any money now that we've got up here in this capital reserve line item, because between those two at 168,000, we're only spending 93 of it on current debt commitments. And that is, one refunding bond is paying for 3 or 4 different projects that all got combined together, and then the Public Works facility payment. It's a lot cheaper to build sewer typically than it is to build water. And so we expect our projects, when it comes to putting pipe in the ground, to just cost a lot less for sewer. So we got $75,000 in excess that we've got in this depreciation and debt service that is accumulating in the fund balance, and will be available for future projects, which would be great if the future projects were just First Street reconstruction. I'd feel very, very comfortable with that. I think we'd be in a good place. because there's also the potential for, millions of dollars to be spent on the wastewater plant. If we don't get assistance, this isn't going to cut it. So that's a longer-term conversation, but we'll be starting it soon.
So the way the budgeting works is that the 76,000 says available to pay for future capital projects. But the way the budgeting works is that there's not like a checking account where it's building up someplace.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the budget is a planning tool. It's a statement of intention.
Yep.
Our intention is that $75,000 that we're collecting in the expense side but not spending on debt payments will accumulate in our fund balance. And think of it as a checking account is fine. We've got an account in the bank that's
Yeah.
accumulating.
So where does that show anywhere here?
No, the
Okay.
balance sheet side of things isn't
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So how much do we have in the bank is the natural question then. I'll show you that next month.
The big reveal. That's fine.
Yeah. We've got more in the wastewater than we do in the water, and we've got more in the electric than we do in the wastewater. Got a lot in the electric, as we talked about last
Right.
time. It's in good shape. So,
So I'll move staff recommendation of a 3% rate increase for sewer for coming year.
Yeah, I'd second it. Seems reasonable.
I just have one question on rate increase. Is that across the board,
yes.
including the G&G part of it then? or are
No,
we- are
no,
we-
no. Okay, we're just talking about the increases to
Our users?
typical users. So
Okay.
our fixed fee and our volume charges that show up on monthly utility bills.
But you said they had a rate increase for this past year.
You passed a rate increase,
Pretty
yeah,
significant.
the end of last year.
End of
Must have been, because
2022?
they brought in, you're saying it's gonna bring in closer to 120 or?
Yeah,
173
and that, some of that's volume related, and some of it's rate related, but it was a significant increase.
Okay,
It's good to have.
I just want to clarify that.
Good to have that knowledge out there, yeah.
G&G is the hauler?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve a 3% rate increase on sewer and a second by
Yes.
Charles. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Hey, and just a quick reminder, we talked about the electric last time.
And I did view that meeting in its entirety, so I'm up to speed
Great.
on that.
Any questions or anything you want to talk about, or you ready to?
No, I'll move that we adopt staff recommendation of a 3% increase for the electric budget, for electric rates for next year.
I can second it. Yeah, and just a little discussion.
Sure.
How I'm sure you've thought about all of this, but how is this actually rolled out? Like, how is this communicated to the public? And more to the point, I'm guessing somebody is very conscious of how to present this in a way that it's going to make sense to people, and people will understand. Like, look, we're doing this because it's necessary. Comparing it, for instance, to inflation for the year, I'm wondering how that is presented out. How do we shape that kind of so that people understand what this is about and why?
Well, this is the most important tool,
This,
this meeting.
yeah,
It's live streamed. It's also available for viewing later. If you want the deep dive into the how and why, this is it.
right.
The way that we communicate about the rates in general is quite a bit simpler. It'll just be a notification. I don't know that I've really felt much of a need to justify the previous increases because there really hasn't been a lot of them. it's been more about good news. Hey, good news, we didn't need a rate increase this
Right.
year. Or, we passed a moderate 2% or 3% rate increase. That, this year we'll probably just mention something about the components of it and that we're happy that it was only this.
This is a
But-
communication to the ratepayers you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's, how do we communicate it? We'll do a press release. We can have it on our website what our rates are. That's kind of just in general. We'll put it on utility bills if we want to. There's typically a handful of customers that are also doing their own budgeting that are interested in what the rates are going to look like
Sure.
for next year, big users.
Right.
So we'll
Right.
maybe talk to them directly, but
The News Herald already had an article, didn't it, about the impending electric rate increase?
I would think
Yeah.
so.
Preliminary.
I thought I saw that.
They did.
On the electric part of it.
Yeah, on the
Yeah,
electric part.
just based on the last.
So I was just
meeting.
thinking, in a year where all three of them are going up, and again, it's not, 3% is not huge, but,
Yeah.
and they're all going up, I mean, or talk about how it's compared to what Simpa's
Yeah.
doing, 15%, and we're able to keep it at 3. I mean, that's good news, it should be for people. But I just think I don't know. Again, it's not PUC's business probably, but I just think there's probably value in trying to communicate this in a way that people will really find it, I don't know, easier to stomach or it's like, okay, I'd prefer it didn't go up at all, but
Yeah, and I'm, not a marketer, right?
you got
So
Patrick Knight.
I'm not trying
communications
We have an
to make
excellent-
people feel one way or
excellent
the other about it.
communications.
I'm just trying to be as open about it as I can.
Yeah.
That's my style.
Yeah.
If you would prefer something different, we can work on something different, but that's kind of what I would do. Just, this is what it is. This is why it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
people can think what they need to.
yeah. I just think there's probably an opportunity to shape the message a little bit. But
Clear and transparent. That's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, what people's circumstances are.
Right,
So 3% for some will be a burden.
Yeah.
right,
For others, it could have been 10 and they wouldn't have noticed.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway,
So any more, we have
Seconded.
a motion to approve a 3% increase on the electric. There was discussion, we need a second.
it was second, I seconded.
Okay, Charles seconds the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries for a 3% increase in electric rates. When did, I have a question. When did Simca pass, or when did they start collecting the 15% increase from the city of Grand Marais? Or have they started already?
I'm not sure that we've seen it on a utility bill yet.
Okay.
But it will probably be the one that you see next month.
So it'll be projected then for basically 2023?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were a month ahead of where they typically are, or actually a couple months ahead. Their normal schedule is to talk about rates in September and then to take action on rates in October that change in January.
So they took action and passed at 15%?
They
Rate.
talked about rates in July,
Yeah.
and they took action in October that is now.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but they sent us a bill for November usage in December. So, that's the one for sure you'll see that increase on. Want to talk about the open meeting law?
Yep, that's next on the.
Fun stuff.
Finally,
We're going to just go over the purpose of it. Its basic requirements, some of the exceptions, I don't know if we'll talk about all 7, and then just a couple of common issues that people typically have questions about. What is it all about? Well, it allows the public to be informed, to detect improper influence, I love that, and to provide input. The basics here are that when you are taking action, you're doing it as a group, and you're doing it in front of the public. Everything that you do happens in front of the public, with very few exceptions. Basic requirements, advance notice of meetings, and the meetings are open to the public. Now we need to define our terms. What's a meeting? In your case, a meeting is where two of you, which is a quorum, discuss, decides, or receives information on issues relating to official business. So, later on, we're going to talk about when two of you together in a setting is not a meeting. But when you're discussing or making decisions about public utilities business, then it's definitely a meeting. So if you meet in the grocery store and you just want to chat about that electric rate, don't do it. Because even two of you is a quorum conducting a meeting if you're talking about business. Receiving information is one that I've seen different places give different feedback on, but the League of Minnesota Cities says if you're at a meeting where people are giving you information about utilities, that's also subject to the open meeting law. And if you go back to the purpose, you can think about why that is. Because you're being influenced. You're gathering information that you're going to use to make decisions. And if you're doing that as a group, then it's only fair that the public gets to see what you got to see.
If we had 5 members on the PUC, then could 2 people talk about it?
They sure could, but I'm still going to urge caution, and I'll tell you why as we get down here. So, the city council obviously has to comply with the open meeting law. All of the other public bodies, like you, but the EDA, the HRA, Fire Relief Association, believe it or not, but our Planning Commission, Library Board, Park Board, Utilities Commission, all those boards, yes, 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 yes. Subcommittees as well, you don't have any, so don't worry about that. And my preference is that all of our boards do all of their business as a whole rather than have subcommittees. Sometimes it's just not practical. Penalties. And these penalties are your penalties. Like you personally, if this law is broken, could potentially be subject to reasonable cost disbursements and attorney fee up to $13,000, a fine of $300 that you cannot be compensated by us for, and potentially a forfeiture of office. It takes intentional violations of this law to be subject to these penalties. But you're being trained now, so if you make any violations, a person could argue that they were intentional. Typically, I have seen it takes more than one intentional violation before things get serious, though. And there's some boards that do it, that have multiple violations. And we've had cases in this county, too, where there's been conversations about that. Thankfully, not for a long time. So, more on what's a meeting. There are different types of meetings, and they have different requirements. We have regular meetings. We have a schedule of your regular meetings, which is 3 o'clock on the first Wednesday of every month is your regular meeting. And at a regular meeting, you can do different things. You put anything you want on the agenda. You can show up and change the agenda. You can add things or take things away from it. Special meetings occurs at a different time or place from a regular meeting. We are at a special meeting right now. It was rescheduled. When you're at a special meeting, you can only talk about what you posted. They require notice, date, time, place, and purpose, the purpose meaning the agenda. And that agenda is fixed. You can't change and add things to it that you didn't tell people you were going to do at a special meeting.
But at a regular meeting, you can?
You can, because they know you regularly meet, and you might talk about anything. And so if they're interested, they have an opportunity to observe that. They can plan ahead. Special meeting, they might not be able to plan ahead for, because you're only given 3 days' notice. And so there's a little more strictness about the rules. We have to post it, but we also have to actually send notice directly to anyone who has asked us to get noticed. So we have a short list of people that get the packets, basically, for these meetings, and that's who's asked us for notice. So like board members, sometimes other governmental elected officials have asked us to be on the list, sometimes press has asked us to be on a list. Those are the type of folks that get notice, and they get our agendas then. All right, here's a crazy one. Was notice of a special meeting required? for this meeting that took place a half hour before the regular meeting time.
Sure.
Absolutely. Different time, same place, but different time. So the regular meeting starts at 3. If you're going to meet at 2:30 instead, that's a special meeting. And you have to give that special notice of it, and the agenda would be fixed.
How about if you have a member that is going to be half an hour late and you wait for him?
Late's different. You know, anybody could have showed up at 3 from the public and had an opportunity to participate
Okay.
at 3:08. But they didn't have an opportunity to show up at 2:30 if you didn't tell them. This is the other kind of meeting now, closed meeting, which has the exact same notice requirements for open meeting, plus an additional requirement that we're going to talk about the statutory authority that we have to close the meeting whenever we close a meeting. And you're never going to have a closed meeting unless the city attorney's involved, and so you don't need to be experts on it. We'll set you up with everything you need if there's a situation where that's called for.
Who in the city does have closed meetings?
The city council does.
Good.
You may have a closed meeting from time to time, but like I said, you won't have one unless the attorney's involved. And so you'll have advice beforehand that it's proper to have the meeting closed. You'll have a script of what you need to say about the statutory authority. We'll tell you what you can and can't talk about during the closed meeting, how the record keeping is done. I mean, it's all very organized and again, with the input of the city attorney. Here's a couple common issues. Social gatherings, right? This is a small town. What are the odds that you're going to run into another member of the Public Utilities Commission from time to time? Very high. It's going to happen all the time. So a social gathering, and you know, you might actually even travel in the same circles. You might actually be friends and hang out with each other. These things happen all the time. There's a quorum present. But if you don't do the things that we said are part of a meeting, receive information, discuss issues of official business, make decisions about official business, then it's not a meeting. And the open meeting law does not apply. That's the legal piece of it. It's also worth thinking about the perception piece of it. If folks can reasonably assume you're talking about this, but they can't prove it, it still did a little bit of damage. So best to, if you're at a large social gathering, you don't have to sit at the same table, right? You can take steps to avoid the appearance of this as well. This one's the tough one. Before and after meetings, there's a quorum present. City business is discussed. The meeting's over. People are hanging out afterwards. They got to debrief a little bit. They, decompress a little bit, talk about the issues a little bit. That likely is a violation of the open meeting law. And so every once in a while, we will have to just provide that reminder to folks. It's not something that I've seen happen in this group a lot, but it'd be pretty easy for two of you to stick around and have questions about something that you just thought of. And this isn't the place for it. Best to give us a call tomorrow or send us an email from home afterwards. But definitely, if you have questions for each other, save it for next meeting. You know, it happens, right? Oh, I should have asked that. I didn't think of it. But the fact is, the meeting's over. You can't ask it anymore. You got to wait till next meeting.
Can we talk to you?
You can talk to me. You can talk to staff. You can talk to anybody but your folks here on the board with you. But remember, your job is really only able to be conducted as a group. And so talking to me, gathering information from me is great. I appreciate it when people have questions and they want to know things. It's even better when, if it's a big issue, we get a chance to talk about it at an agenda and you all get to hear the same information at the same time and the public gets to see it too.
Yep. So, but if I'm talking to you, say after the meeting,
Yeah,
and Bill happens to be there, now is that a violation?
that is a potential violation.
Yep.
Yeah. If he's sitting and listening, then probably. So just that, the focus here is that the business occurs during the meeting. And when the meeting's over, we're done talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another tricky one, serial meetings. So, can you talk to one other person on a group of 5? It's not a quorum, yes, but what if they talk to another person too? Now, technically, 3 of you have been involved in the conversation. Even though you never had 3 in the same room together, you really actually achieved a quorum, kind of end around at a quorum. And that's what's called a serial meeting.
In
So-
our case, any talk
Yeah.
is a serial meeting.
You don't have to worry about this as much in this group, but there are other boards you might participate in where there's 5, which is a more typical number. And so that's where we advise, don't ever talk to each other about official business unless you're in a meeting. And talking is one thing, but really serial meetings are a lot trickier when it comes to emails. Because even if you send an email to just one other person on your board of 5, or you respond to all with, one person from the public sends you all together a question, and you respond to that person, but you copy all, so now everyone has seen your response, that's potentially a serial meeting and a violation. And it's tricky stuff, so you just got to watch it and be careful.
Okay, so just thinking about that particular example. I don't know if it would ever happen, but somebody says, hey, so I get an email from somebody in the city, say, hey, I heard you, watched the thing and you guys approved a 3% increase. What's this about? I don't appreciate that. You guys obviously are making reckless decisions. I don't know, whatever. So I get this email and I respond to that person
Yes.
directly, but I guess what you're saying is that I should not copy other people on that. I could copy you, or Shane, or Patrick, or somebody, but
Yep. Don't send it. It shouldn't be sent from you directly to either of those 2 guys. If you want something to be sent to those 2 guys, send it to us, and we'll run it through a meeting agenda packet. Or if it's just information, we'll distribute. It'll be available to the public in some way, but yeah, just send it through us. The trick is to watch the reply all, because it's accident often that you didn't mean to, but you do anyway. It's a very common occurrence. Now, there's some opinion that emails are not meetings, but I think most folks that are giving advice on this say that that's a potential problem area, a potential violation, and just really watch it when it comes to emails. For us, one of the tools that we use as staff is when we're sending things to groups that are all on a board together, we'll try to blind copy instead of carbon copy. So even if you try to respond to all, you can't.
yeah, I could see where someone might send an email to all 3 of us at once and say,
Happens to the council
Yeah.
all the time.
right. And so how's that handled? How is the reply handled?
Different ways. My advice is, if you're going to reply directly to the person. If you want someone else to be copied, copy staff. But you're thinking about, not only do you want to reply, but you want people to know that a reply has occurred.
Yeah.
If you don't know if anybody's replied
Correct.
at all, it's uncomfortable and you don't
Correct.
like it. So involve us, we can help sort through that.
Yeah, so I could in that case.
If you want to know if anybody replied, ask me, and I'll ask them, and we'll find out, right? And it's a little bit clunky,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But this is important purpose, so that the public gets to see everything you do as a group, all
Yeah.
the official decisions.
And any of us would want the other ones to know that we did reply.
I find, particularly on the council, that it's useful for them to know, like, they definitely want to know.
Yeah,
Has this person's concern been addressed?
correct, yeah, exactly.
Now, sometimes it's easy to address by just answering a question. Sometimes there's a policy conversation that needs to occur to address somebody's concern. And if that's the case, here is the venue. Your reply actually doesn't address it. You have to talk about it as a group in order to really address it.
So we reply, copy you, and the presumption is that you're going to inform the other people that,
If they want to know, I'm not necessarily going to just send a note out to everybody, hey, just wanted you all to know he already replied. I won't do that unless you ask me to. But if they ask me, has anybody replied, and I know, then I'll tell them.
I see. Okay.
In your meetings, you don't have a lot of public involvement directly. I mean, maybe you have noticed. We don't get a lot of guests at these meetings. The council does, and they get a lot of notes, and it's really part of their job, much more directly than yours, to deal with that sort of issue. And so they've created a space on their agenda specifically to deal with it. Open forum. Every regular meeting, we'll take any comments, any concerns, any that have accumulated via letters or emails before the meeting. And we can always add that here, too, if that becomes an issue and you want to find a way to officially address those sorts of things. Here's the email question. 2 of you, through separate emails, comment on and provide direction on official business. So I'm asking you for input on a press release, and 2 of you send me a reply with input. Is that a violation of the open meeting law?
I would say yes.
I'd say no, because we didn't talk to each other, we only talked to you.
Talk to you.
Well, so there's, wait, but if we only talk to you, then it's not serial.
But I talked to you, and I talked to you, and now I've end-arounded.
You pay the $300.
No, because I'm not subject to the open meeting law.
Shoot.
You're
You
subject
set
to
us
it.
up.
I wouldn't do that to you. I mean, I shouldn't say that. We've definitely reached out to input for folks, but we're cautious about that. If I've got a question that I want all 3 of your policy input on, I'm going to put it on an agenda and ask you in a meeting. I'm not going to ask you outside of a meeting. We don't make decisions that way. If I need to ask you, it goes on an agenda. If it doesn't need to be on an agenda, I'm not going to ask you. We're just going to do it. Cautious.
Who's the League of Minnesota?
League of
Cities?
Minnesota Cities.
Yeah.
And it's the electronic stuff where this is much harder. It's easy to be cautious when you can see around the room who's here. The electronic stuff is much harder. All right, social media. This one's another one that's worth just bringing up. Happens, right? There's a Facebook group. 3 of you all see a comment about our electric rates. Maybe there's some misinformation or something that you think needs to be added to the conversation, and so you correct it or add it. Maybe 2 of you do it separately. On social media, if you're exchanging information with members of the public, that's technically not a violation of the open meeting law.
Even though maybe 2 of us read it.
Even though maybe 2 of you read it. I think the open meeting law is a little bit behind on this, and it wouldn't surprise me if that changes at some point. There's a balance here, right? Because there's a lot of resources required to monitor social media and make sure that information is put where it needs to be to do good. I would even question if it's possible. But if we're thinking about this in an altruistic way and we want to try that, it's very useful to have board members adding into that.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it can look a lot like you're talking about policy then outside of a meeting, which happens regularly. You know, are people just going to come up to you on the street and talk to you about the rates? They might.
Right.
They might. And it's great if you would talk to them. You know, that's the polite thing to do. That's part of your job, to just share what you're thinking. But it's even more important that everything you're sharing, you are sharing here too, with each other. Like, that's where it really needs to happen. You need to know what each of you are thinking, where you're coming from, why you want to do what you want to do, and then vote on it. So, yes, you can do this, but I would, again, advise caution. This one, I think we know a lot about now because of COVID. Can you participate remotely? They call it interactive television. I love that. That's when this law was started to talk about. We've since, moved on to many different brand names for what we do here. But if you can, yes, you can participate remotely. At least one of you has to be in here in order for the meeting to occur. All of you have to be able to hear and see all of the discussion that's occurring in the meeting, which means if you're on your phone in your car and you don't have the video on, you have not met that test. They need to be able to see you. That was tricky during the beginning of COVID, where still the technology is being worked out and the video is not always working. And if for some reason your screen goes blank, now during COVID there was exceptions to this, but today that wouldn't work. Your screen has to be on. If you want to participate in the meeting, You need to be there visually. People need to be able to see you. You also need to be able to see everything that's going on in here in order for it to work. And then the trickiest part about this, wherever you are that's not here, has to be open and accessible to the public. And it has to be posted with the same notice requirements, which means if you're going to be at McDonald's in Two Harbors in the lobby, then we have to tell people that's where you're going to be 3 days before the meeting so that they have an opportunity to be present wherever you are. If you're going to meet with us from the kitchen of your lake cabin, as long as you're willing to make that open and accessible to the public, you can. And we have to then notify folks that's where you're going to be. The best way to do this is to just pick a public location where it's already open to the public. But the tricky part is 3 days' notice. You need to tell us where you're going to be. So I'm traveling, but I still want to participate in the meeting. It gets really tricky because you need to know exactly where you're going to be. And if not, you can't participate in the meeting. You can watch us, you can live stream it, but you can't be there.
That seems a little dated too, because, people now I guess there are people who don't have the ability to see you then.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering whether this gets updated as well,
Yeah,
because
but
what does
it's-
access mean?
It's gotta
What
be
does
pretty-
open and
It's gotta be
accessible
pretty
mean?
rare now, especially if your live stream from here was including the person on the screen,
Yeah.
then anybody could see them.
Think back to the
But yeah, I know.
purpose statement.
Sure, sure.
And they want to know influence too. So it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
just, are you there, but who's with you?
Oh,
What's your sources of information? And if they can be at the location you're at, even if nobody is, just the fact that they can be, that helps address that issue. Okay. Craig's in Florida. He's participating in a meeting using Skype. Again, that's how old this is. Who uses Skype anymore? Projected on a large screen television. The Florida meeting room's open to the public. 4 council members were here at this regular meeting location. Did this comply?
apparently not if they didn't notify where he was.
Yeah, was there notice given?
I like that question. Yes. If it was noticed, it does comply.
iPad
But again-
13009.
Yes.
Pretty hard
What's
to do
that?
that. I guess
That
if you-
is the
I guess if you were living in
state's
Florida or something.
information policy department. That's all I've got for you, folks. Any questions about this?
Yeah, the interactive television, I get the idea that people have to be able to, I get the concept. If you're going to be at some remote location, members of the public should be able to access you as well. Why does it matter if I can hear, if I'm at that remote location and I can hear or see? Maybe I can just hear. So what? How does that change? How does that have anything to do with open meeting?
The 80% of communication is nonverbal, is the key here.
Well, but aren't I just at a loss myself because I'm not able to communicate as effectively or see as much or something? I mean, I
Yes,
see it.
and that's not acceptable. Like, you need to be able to fully participate in order for it to be considered a quorum.
Right. No, I get that that would be the ideal thing. I'm just trying to understand why that violates some open meeting concept. I mean, or undue influence or whatever else. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Just
Well,
curious.
you need to also, I mean, your assumption is everything's great here in this room, but you don't necessarily know that's the case if you don't have access to the room. And, you need to be able to also know who's influencing the decisions and who from the public is here and what are they saying. And, I'm kind of with you on like, where does that fit on the hierarchy of
Right.
problems? But I like just the principle behind it is that everyone's still able to fully participate, fully meaning they can see and hear.
Yep. Okay, another question, if I can jump. I don't know if there's a queue. But,
Doesn't look like it.
we had talked about getting a tour of the wastewater plant and getting a tour of electrical facilities and such. And there's some discussion at some point, like, well, we have to do that individually. We can't do that in twos or threes.
Right. I mean, you could if we posted it and allowed it to be open to the public, but we don't want to do that. It's just too difficult to manage.
A big group from the
And,
public.
well, and not, we don't know if it's a big group. It might be nobody. It likely will be nobody. It could be 75 people. We just don't know. So it's much easier to just separate that.
Okay.
Well,
So,
feel free and think up more questions and send them my way.
Do we have to have a motion to approve the open meeting law?
It's not up to you. I'm so sorry.
that was good information. to
Yeah.
know.
It's always
We
good to
approve the
be-
information.
Good to be reminded.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thanks, appreciate that, that's good.
Yeah, and thanks for your diligence on paying attention to that.
No other information, that's, then I make a motion, or I guess adjourn the meeting. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.